The Biden administration treated the press as poorly as any president has ever treated them, gave them less access, answered no questions, no transparency at any given time. Donald Trump's answered more questions in 3 weeks than Joe Biden answered in 4 years. Elon Musk answered more than
and also a lot of the answers.
Come on, Brian. This administration is giving the most access to the press they could possibly want.
Baker, who is a longtime foreign correspondent, he covers the White House for the New York Times. He said, having served as a Moscow correspondent in the early days of Putin's reign, this reminds me of how the Kremlin took over its own press pool and made sure that only compliant journalists were given access.
Okay, can we just address this dictator business? I'm going to quote from some statistics put together. So our old friend Chris Cillizza, who calculated that in the first month of the Trump administration, the president took 1,009 questions. Hardly dictatorial behavior. Same stat for Joe Biden, 141. And I would remind you all that in 2023, the Biden administration revoked the hard passes of 442 journalists. And at the time, the White House Correspondents Association took, quote, a non-committal stance. So if you're worried about transparency, Trump is being far more transparent than any recent administration.
Why were their press passes revoked?
I don't know.
Was it because they didn't go to the White House frequently? Because
I don't know. They lost their access.
That happens in every administration.
They lost their access.
Besides, the Biden people never called on James Rosen from Newsmax, and he's a real legitimate reporter.
Yes, we will continue to cover this. Libras are melting down on social media after Trump administration took a decision to remove these crazy people. Jimmy calls for news organization to boycott the next White House press briefing if they handpick reporters. I don't know, this is coming a day after the White House press secretary, Caroline, declared that the White House Correspondents Association will no longer decide who get into briefings. We are going to give the power back to the people. For a very long time, they have played this game. This is time for them to retain. If you look at Trump's first cabinet meeting, Associated Press, Rio Star were not allowed to be part. That is how it's supposed to be. These people believe that the mainstream media is supposed to be the one doing everything. And it's important we take an exclusive look into what is going on exactly.
Associated Press will continue to have limited access to the Oval Office in Air Force One after a federal judge denied the AP's request for an emergency order to reinstate its press access. After the White House restricted the AP from entering certain spaces over the AP's refusal to adopt the term Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico, the AP sued to have its privileges restored. The judge ruled in favor of the White House. His reasoning for not reinstating full access was the AP still has access to cover events involving the president, even if it's not in person. However, the judge warned the White House's actions might not hold up in court, saying the law may not be on its side if it continues to restrict the AP's access, and the decision is, quote, clearly viewpoint discrimination. The judge wrote it might be appropriate for the White House to consider if what they're doing is really appropriate given the case law. This case echoes a similar incident in 2019 when a federal court ordered the White House to restore CNN reporter Jim Acosta's press credentials after they were revoked by the White House. The judge in this case called for an expedited briefing with a hearing scheduled for March 20th. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, reacted to the judge's ruling on Fox News' Sean Hannity program.
The judge's denial of the Associated Press's request reinforces what I said from the podium last week and what President Trump has been saying. Covering the American presidency in the most intimate and limited spaces in this White House, in the Oval Office, on the Air Force One, is a privilege. It is not a legal right. And we want all voices to have that opportunity. And that's why we've expanded the James S. Brady briefing room to invite truly legitimate, independent journalists, podcasters, and other media types into that room to cover this president with honesty and accuracy.
That is it. The White House doubled down on the fact that it's a privilege. They want this point to sink into their brains. It's a privilege to cover this administration. when you take a look at what the mainstream media did in the past, it's totally different from what we're observing now. If you notice, this White House Association used to decide who is supposed to enter, but things have changed around. It is not the same. It is no more working the way they wanted because they used to favor only the mainstream media. At a certain point, when I saw this, I was amazed that at least podcasters, independent creators should now be able to do what they are doing.
Its journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat in this briefing room, legacy media outlets who have been here for years will still participate in the pool, but new voices are going to be welcomed in as well. As part of these changes, we will continue the rotation amongst the 5 major television networks to ensure the President's remarks are heard far and wide around this world. We will add additional streaming services which reach different audiences than traditional cable and broadcast. This is the ever-changing landscape of the media in the United States today. We will continue to rotate a print pooler who has the great responsibility of quickly transcribing the President's remarks and disseminating them to the rest of the world. And we will add outlets to the print pool rotation who have long been denied the privilege to partake in this experience, but are committed to covering this White House beat. We will continue to rotate a radio pooler and add other radio hosts who have been denied access, especially local radio hosts who serve as the heartbeat of our country. And we will add additional outlets and reporters who are well suited to cover the news of the day and ask substantive questions of the President of the United States, depending on the news he is making on that given day.
The liberal media are upset with this. They are not happy. Oh, boycott the next White House press briefing. Oh, do this one. If you boycott, what will happen? The next week, you will continue because a lot of people will be able to cover what is going on. You can actually do this. The other day I saw this crazy man on CNN that was fired a few weeks ago, Jim Acosta. He also said the same thing. He advocated like people should boycott the White House after they told AP, stop. They didn't want to listen. This same thing is now happening.
Can't make a distinction based on an organization that you just don't like. And so I think you're right. They don't seem to understand that. They want to be able to pick who asks the president questions. That goes against decades and decades of tradition.
And the press office trying to sell this as an act of populism, giving power back to the people, when, of course, as Peter says, it just gives power to the administration to control the mess.
What these people fail to understand is that the Trump administration is totally different from the Biden administration. They are transparent. What I saw during the Biden administrations, the man will answer questions with a note. He knows the reporters to ask. He knows the type of questions that will be surfacing. He has the answers. But with Trump, any question can surface anywhere, and the man will be ready to respond without blinking eyes. But we didn't see that during the Biden administration.
It's about as Fox radicalizes and as it becomes even more and more of a political tool. Zerwick, you wrote a column recently for The Sun about this, saying Fox should be viewed as a political tool. And that raises a question. Should it be a part of the White House press pool? Should it be afforded the privileges that come with news gathering? Even though they do have some news reporters at the White House, you're saying they're primarily a political tool. So should that be reassessed, Zerwick?
Listen, I really do. I think it's a discussion we need to have. Look, you're not supporting democracy. You're not supporting the larger values of this culture. They don't even stand up as a opposition party, but there's nothing journalistic in what Lachlan Murdoch said. And you know what? I say, hey, you know what? Let's take them at their word. Let's not let them on the plane. You want to let the Proud Boys on your plane, on Air Force One? No, I don't think so. These guys are doing the same thing.
DC political contributor. I'm not big on navel gazing when it comes to the press, but Eugene, for people who don't understand the importance of the press pool at the White House, the people who follow the president day in and day out, explain the big picture implications for Americans getting news, also for the constitutional order.
Yeah. Let me explain how the coverage of the presidential pool works. Whether this president or others are in the Oval Office, traveling abroad, traveling down the street, there's always a group of journalists that is called the press pool that covers that person's every move. They share their notes, their video, their sound with their colleagues who are not there so that they can cover the president. And that information goes to the people in this country and all over the world. And for nearly a century, the WHCA, the White House Correspondents Association, has created a professional standards for format, length, accuracy, most importantly for the American people. And they could trust that those standards created by the folks that actually do the work were understood by everyone. You could trust the documents and the reports that were coming out of that. That it can no longer be trusted, frankly, because at the end of the day, the standards will be created by the folks that are being covered. And that is different than it has ever been. And at the end of the day, like I said in my statement, this is not about us at the WHCA. This is about the American people being able to depend on what comes out of these press pools and getting unvarnished look at the people who run their country.
We just saw a picture of one of the deans of the White House press corps, Peter Baker of the New York Times. He wrote this, Eugene: having served as a Moscow correspondent in the early days of Putin's reign, this reminds me of how the Kremlin took over its own press pool and made sure that only compliant journalists were given access. Is this a warning to journalists? If you ask questions or write stories the president doesn't like, you're not going to have access.
You know, I think at the end of the day, what the White House has said publicly, or a White House official said, that this was an F around and find out moment for the WHCA, not thinking, it seems, about the implications for the chilling effect it might have, and most importantly, the impact on the American people. Like I said, to be able to trust what comes out of those press reports. And, you know, in a free country, leaders shouldn't get to choose. And for a very long time, White Houses, both Democrat and Republican, have allowed the WHCA, a third party of elected people that are in the board, to help coordinate all of these pools, because they know that it makes them look strong. You're not picking the people who are doing it, and you stay away from it. And frankly, many of them decided that it took up too much of their time. That is changing, it seems.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected.
Civil servant, honor of a lifetime.
Videos, God bless you abundantly. Please, always share the videos. If you notice clips after this, that is just for the YouTube algorithm.
She was asked this week.
There was a meeting behind closed doors a short time ago between the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass,
departments.
When I talked about it, it's from the city, from the...
You know, I mean, I don't know how many sets she visited, but everybody was like, you know...
Really? Oh, show it to him, Jamie. It's so creepy.
Around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up property.
These people don't actually care.
He came in and he said, you don't rake. you don't rake.
The city of the Palisades is burning. And, I flew here last night. I was on a plane.
You getting water to areas that need...
He's been trained.
Yeah, and then I think all our tax dollars probably went for Gavin's hair gel.
The Democratic Party has about everything.
Tyranny is rising in the White House.
I saw in the news yesterday